When did your passion for nutrition start?
I started to learn about all the positive effects of the nutrients in the food itself. And that's where really my passion for performance nutrition itself began. But I really like the whole concept of what food can do just socially, but also inside the body itself.
In terms of decision making, concentration, emotional regulation, and the fatigue, how much nutrition influence your performance in terms of that?
The brain relies on fuel. It relies on micronutrients. It relies on fluid. So you really want to make sure all those things are correct. And then if they are adjusted to the neurological demands the brain has, then you will have the impact on better focus, on better decision making. But it works the other way around as well. So if you don't have everything optimized and your brain is under a lot of stress, you will notice your focus goes down, your decision making goes down, your precision on the field goes down.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back on FBT, where the game gets down to business. But today, we are in the peak performance show, and I'm delighted to be joined by what I call a performance nutritionist, somebody that, for me personally, and I talk about myself, would have helped me tremendously throughout my career. And without further ado, I welcome to FBT to Peak Performance, Sanne Kramer. How are you doing, San?
I'm good, thank you. Good to be here.
So tell me, you called yourself, or your title is a performance nutritionist. Do you have your own practice? Which you feel better nutrition? Is that all right?
Yeah, that's right.
You see, that's right. So for those of you who want to perform in terms throughout nutrition, she is your person. And I wanted just to ask yourself from start, because when I was a player, nutrition for me was maybe the key factor of my performance. But I didn't know that from the start. I did, and yeah, I never knew that. I only noticed nutrition importance when I was maybe overweight. I was injured. I was feeling heavy, and from a young age, people were telling me, "Oh, you gotta eat this. You gotta eat that. You gotta eat that." When did your passion for nutrition started?
So what I think is really great about my job is like the greatness of food itself. So I can talk about food for hours. That's why I think I have the greatest job in the world. But usually, as you said, nutrition has kind of this negative context about it because, as you said, you only think about it when you're fat, when you're injured. It's all those negatives. But what people don't really quite understand often is that nutrition can do so many things to your body. And for me, I really started as a young girl cooking, baking cookies in the kitchen, giving them out to my family, and I saw all those happy faces because I gave them the cookies. And for me, the joy of just eating really was the main thing. But then when I did my study, nutrition and dietetics, I started to learn about all the positive effects of the nutrients in the food itself. And that's where really my passion for performance nutrition itself began. But I really like the whole concept of what food can do just socially, but also inside the body itself.
When, because you're talking about performance, and honestly, I'm a performance coach myself. I'm in love with performance. When did you realize that nutrition, as good as food is, enjoyable as food is, could really play a part into I would say, the human, not necessarily to the athlete, but in general to the human performance in life?
Yeah. So I think for me, I really come from field hockey. And when I did nutrition and dietetics, you really start doing the study with like the sick people and like clinical nutrition. But then also when you learn there about why eating a banana is good, I really tried to implement it on my own sport, and that's where like the start of really experiencing the impact nutrition has on the body began for me. Quite personal experience too.
In terms of now, if we get into, I would say, the professional environment, you talk about hockey. Now I'm talking about football, but high level, high performance. What does, for you, what does a real match week look like in order, not the ideal one, but the realistic one in order to perform?
Yeah, so for me, it's there's really two ways in how I do my work there, because I work at Zwolle, but it's part time and I have my own practice part time. So how a week looks like at Zwolle, I'm there on the training days. And then for me, really making sure everything is aligned to make sure everything works for the match day on Sunday. So I really talk to staff there, I talk to players, make sure the kitchen has everything ready for the week. We make adjustments where needed, and we talk to medical staff if players are injured, or if they have tiny little pains. We need to make sure we get rid of by the match day itself. So I do that on the training days. And then for my work at Veel, it's more players come in and we help them throughout the whole season, really on a personal level there. So then we have contact with the player throughout the week, but it's more ad hoc on match days itself, making sure, well, if like the time changes, if the meals at the club or the meals at home change, we need to make ad hoc changes there.
I remember when I used to play. I have a big body. I used to be a central defender, big lad. And sometime I didn't. My question is, do, does the position and the position, the minutes you play changes? I mean, do you work about that in terms of performance? Because I know I'm a big one. The striker could have been a small one. How do you adapt the nutrition? Do you adapt the nutrition about the position?
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think it's becoming more and more important to have personalized nutrition plans there. So, as you said, body composition is something that matters for the nutritional plans we give them, the strategies we use. It's the goals as well. So, as you said, maybe you're need to reduce body fat percentage. It really has an impact on how much you want to eat at what times. Then when you maybe need to gain some weight, and if you need to gain muscle mass. Also, position matters as well, position on the field. But then those those differences are usually a bit less big than like personal goals can be. But the amount of minutes you play really does play a big part in how you want to eat, mainly after the matches. Because on beforehand, even if you start on the bench, you really want to make sure you're ready to play whenever you need to be performing on the field. But then afterwards, you really want to make sure you compensate for, yeah, the amount of fuel you have used. Usually, you do that with the data you have, and the strength and conditioning coach, or they really try to make sure all the data over the team is right there as well. But we do that on a nutritional level as well.
When we talk about performance, especially under pressure, because the higher you get, the more pressure there is. You feeling the body. because straight away we think, oh, you know what, I'm hungry, or I need to feed my body, but we're also feeding the brain in terms of decision making, concentration, emotional regulation under fatigue. How much nutrition influence your performance in terms of that?
It really does have a big impact, and it's something players often don't realize until they experience the differences. Yeah.
Trust me,
um,
yes, I do. I'm guilty.
yeah, I think the difference between young players and yeah, is really there, so you really need to um, make sure you experience this already. And I think for us as a nutritionist, it's a difficulty there, but it does have a big impact because the brain relies on fuel, it relies on micronutrients, it relies on fluid, so you really want to make sure all those things are correct. And then if they are adjusted to the neurological demands the brain has, then you will have the impact on better focus, on better decision making. But it works the other way around as well. So if you don't have everything optimized and your brain is under a lot of stress, you will notice your focus goes down, your decision making goes down, your um, precision on the field goes down, and yeah, well, things as injury risk they rise. So it is important to make sure you're rightly fueled, you have in all your micronutrients, and make sure fluid is good as well.
I give you an example. I remember when mm, especially late in the game, because you get tired, and sometimes we don't really realize that maybe what we had eaten even the night before could have played, a big role, because we only think about pre-match, maybe I ate too much pasta, and I'm feeling a little bit heavy. And I remember sometimes I was going through a drop of concentration towards the end, and late goals, I was making mistakes, and I quickly realized that nutrition, I didn't want to, I didn't want to admit it, but how much do you think when player fade mentally? I didn't want to admit, I was in denial. When player fade mentally in the game, how often the nutrition is maybe one of the key part of it.
I do think it's maybe bigger than players realize, because so usually, when you get fatigued at like the 18th minute, you say, "Oh, it's my condition. It needs to be better," or "I didn't sleep well," or "It's the nerves," or something like that. The opponent, it's their fault. Um, but I do think often nutrition plays a role in it. So maybe you didn't sleep that well, but also then nutrition plays a role. So I think it's really more often it's not only one reason why you get fatigued in the 18 minutes, but it's a combination of things. But in whatever reason it is, nutrition does play a role, because if you eat well the day before the match, you sleep better as well, and it will help you. If your opponent is tougher than you would have thought, you need to fuel better to make sure you can meet them at their level. So I do think nutrition plays a role.
Yeah. And yeah, honestly, now that I'm retired, I became almost a master of nutrition. But when I was younger, it's crazy and it's a bit funny how I couldn't even really think about it. That brings me to my other question in terms of, the different the career stages. When you're younger, obviously you have different needs than when you are a little bit older. But what are the biggest nutrition mistakes that you see in young players?
So for young players, they do have other challenges than older players could have. I think for younger players, it really is. about making sure their nutritional behaviors are good. So we need to really focus on getting the good routines in, because a young player, he starts at an academy, but he still goes to school. He maybe is in his growth spurt or just right after his growth spurt. And there's really coming a lot on the player, so their agendas are busy. They have long days from home, they go to school and then to training, or the other way around. So I do think the mistakes young players make the most is eating mainly later in the day. So they eat a lot when they come home, they're super hungry, they eat like 3 plates of pasta, and then maybe some quark after. But they really use their main fuel earlier in the day already. So they need to make sure they eat at regular times. They need to think about their day on beforehand to make sure they have like good nutrition at hand to eat before practice, at school, after practice, and not go to McDonald's and then 3 plates of dinner at home. I think that's the
But
most important one.
we all done it because when you're young, your metabolism, your body composition is a bit different. Obviously, things change with time. But I remember the mistakes that we used to do. We could eat anything, and because you don't see it from your eye, you don't think that is damaging anything on the inside. So for me, when I don't know, when you're young, you don't realize things, but when you're getting older, how now do you deal now with the older players? What are the mistakes that they're doing?
Yeah, so for older players, they are obviously a bit more experienced. So they already maybe had injuries and they realized, they experienced why nutrition is important for them. So usually they have like better routines already. Their nutritional timing is a bit better. Often at clubs, like the nutritional environment they're in is better as well, because there's more like high quality foods that are already provided for them. So with older players, you can dive into details really way more than you can with younger players, because they really have a good basis there already. And there it's more about making sure they consistently make the right choices. So for older players, the focus isn't that much on, for example, gaining muscle mass, but it's more about injury prevention. It's about having a good distribution of fuel throughout the training, throughout a match, as you said. So it's more about making sure they can recover well. And there, the mistakes they tend to make, it's more about lacking the to consistently make the right choices there.
Yeah. I think there's a myth, not even a myth, but there's a situation between aesthetic and the body composition. Because when we eat, there's so much that we see, and we're living in a society, especially in the high level sports, when everything's got to be aesthetic, but we don't realize what's happening on the inside. When I was playing, I had a weight issue. I had a weight issue. I was looking at pasta, and I thought I was gonna put on weight just by looking at pasta, and I never really understood. And I was always fighting with my weight, and that almost played a big role in my psychological part. How do you optimize the body composition, without pushing the players into unhealthy habits? Because sometimes I was going into diet because I was going to make the weight the next day, and I didn't want to get a fine, but I was getting myself into a very unhealthy roller coaster.
Yeah, yeah. I really love this question, because I think there's way too much focus on body composition or fat mass specifically, on performance outputs. Because, well, don't get me wrong, because body composition is important and body fat does play a role in your performance outcome. But how can we measure this? I don't think we really can measure it that well. I mean, what is then the optimal body fat percentage you have? Well, I can tell you what it is. So we usually focus a lot on this 12% body fat cutoff point, and I think a lot of players focus on it, a lot of clubs focus on it, a lot of players focus on how you look aesthetically. So if you look like you have a lot of fat percentage, well, maybe you don't even have it. Well, when you relate this to like performance output itself, it isn't really that clear. So you can maybe have a body fat percentage of 13, and you could play like your best self. For another, he usually is at 8%, and when he has a body fat percentage of 11, maybe he's really not fit for him. So I do think we focus on it way too much. We shouldn't do that. So I really think the job of a performance nutritionist, and maybe everyone in the staff of a club, should focus really more on the nutritional habits that do have an impact on your performance outcome. So, for example, getting in the right fuel, making sure your recovery nutrition is right, um, yeah, stuff like that. Um, and when players do focus on the body composition itself too much, because you usually do, around summertime, everybody wants to be summer fit, and they see like they're scrolling on Instagram and making sure they're good right there. I do think our job as nutritionists is to relate them back to the good habits that will help them with their performance outcome, really.
Honestly, you've hit the point. That's something that I never really understood because the aesthetic, we're living in a society, is very much about image. Uh, there's a trend. Every week there's a new trend. Everybody there's talking about nutrition, supplement. Everybody has a solution. And for us as athletes, how do you build the trust in evidence-based nutrition?
Yeah, so it's not really that sexy, right? Because I can talk about carb loading and how it will help your performance output on a match day, but that really doesn't. The players themselves, they don't want to hear that. And it's the same for like the body composition. If a player has it in his head, he wants to lose the weight, he will lose it, and maybe he does like a crash diet or some weird juicy diet or something like that. But I think it is really important to make sure you have the trust with the player there. So you really try to build personal relationships with the players to make sure you have that trust, and to really you can go back to that when they are trying to have these weird ideas about nutrition. And building that trust, it really does take time and it can be difficult, but I think it's really important to make sure you get to know the player itself. So know what he likes, know what his goals are, even if you don't agree with them. Know their usual routines, know their kind of personality, to make sure you can talk about it whenever they are drifting away from you. And it's not only about nutrition itself, then I do think we tend to talk too much about nutrition, even me, because I really like to talk about food. But you really have to be able to talk about different stuff with them as well, to talk about which music they like, how their vacation went, how their children are doing, stuff like that, because you are still dealing with human beings and you need to build a personal relationship besides the players themselves.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's all a lot about have to do about the cultural taste, for example,
Yeah.
because I've done honestly, I've been through everything. Vegan, microbiotic. I was I'm telling you, I was so obsessed by my performance that you become almost brainwashed because you just want to be a certain way, a certain look. Now, how do you? In terms of the teams, because you're collaborating with teams, is it important for you to be in one accord, with the staff when it comes to nutrition and well-being in a way?
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk about the trust you need to have with the player, I do think being able to um, fall back onto your team as well. So your medical staff, your coaches, the SNC coaches. It really will help you with whatever you're trying to do in nutrition itself, because so I really like to work with the staff. I'm in continue contact with all the staff I have to make sure we adjust everything to the training load, to injury status, recovery status, whatever. Um, but being able to have the trust with the player, it really helps to have your other staff behind you. Because when I tell a player he needs to do something, or I'm trying to get him to change a certain routine, it really helps if other staff are telling him as well from their perspective. It really helps to make sure the trust of me with the player is better. It helps to get buy-in from the player as well, and really helps to make sure the player can make those long-term changes. For example, if I tell a player he needs to drink water, even right now when it's not really that hot and the player doesn't sweat a lot, if I tell him, maybe the player will think, yeah, well, whatever, I'm not listening to you. If other stuff, for example, the SNC coach tells him, because it will help him improve his explosiveness on the field as well. If the trainer will tell him he needs to drink because right now they have like a little pause in the training to drink, then the player might think, oh, well, it's not only her telling me this, it's everybody telling me this. So maybe it is something I need to focus on.
That's you being very, I would say, clever, adaptable in terms of it doesn't matter if the message is coming from you as long as the message is understood by the player. So sometimes a person is more, I would say, suited to pass a message for it has maybe more credibility as long as the player understands.
Yeah.
How do you yeah. Yeah, for me, you spot on, and that's why I would have loved to have you when I was playing. I would have been so far, so far. How do you see the performance nutritionist role evolving in the future?
So, um, as for our field itself, so the field of a nutritionist itself, I do think players are getting more and more their own personal staff, so personal nutritionist for them. I do think that's a really important one, because I think nutrition will be more and more tailored to training load, data output in general, and it is something we can adjust the nutrition to on a personal level. So I think that's really an important one for us nutritionists, to try and make use of all the data to get to the most tailored advice for the players itself.
Just to finish, to close us off, uh, I mean, what is your ideal performance nutritionist, I would say, environment? What would it be ideal if you had you know, a little, a little magic stick? How would you like it to be?
So I think it's really about making sure players are able to eat stuff they like still. So usually, for example, at a club now, we can make sure there's a lot of options at like the buffets, but really making sure the player gets his right amount of carbs, proteins, whatever on the plate that are adapted to him from like training output, for example. But then also making sure it's good food, so it's whatever that player itself really likes. We need quite a few more chefs to be able to get there.
Yes, that's spot on. We need a different chef coming from different origin because we like African food, so it has to be, it has to be a little bit sometime healthy. But no, thank you very much, San, because for me, the success, the performance is built quietly. Sometimes we look at performance, at everything that shines, everything that's loud, but the best performances are built quietly, daily, in the kitchen, in the kitchen. So last word for the audience, and from you.
Yeah, I think I really like what you're saying there, because when we look at successful players, I think in the future it will be less and less about talent itself and more about how good you're able to make sure you can evolve over time in terms of training, but then recovery, mental status. It's becoming more and more important, I think, to make sure you can really achieve the peak performance for over a longer period of time as a football player.
So, guys, if you want to know more, once again, there's a peak performance conference at the Den on the 28th of January. Stan will be there. And trust me, there's a lot of things that you got to learn that I still got to learn about her. And I can't wait to see her. San, thank you very much for joining us. In the meantime, guys, take care of yourself and welcome back on Football Business Television, where the game gets down to business. See you next time. Thank you. Bye bye.